In the howling storm of 1878, lightning cracked the Arizona sky like God's own whip, and a lone cowboy lay bleeding in the mud until one act of impossible kindness from the very people he represented began to rewrite the rules of hate and survival. The year was 1878, and the Arizona Territory was wild and unforgiving. Ethan Cole was 28, tall and lean, with sun-bleached hair and eyes the color of faded denim. He had come west 5 years earlier from a small farm in Missouri, chasing dreams of open land and cattle. That night, he was riding home from Tucson with a sack of flour, coffee, nails, and a new rifle slung across his back. The storm hit without warning. Thunder rolled like cannon fire. Rain fell in sheets so heavy it felt like the sky was breaking apart. Then, from the shadows of the twisted mesquite trees, 6 outlaws rode out, masked, armed, hungry for easy money. They circled Ethan like wolves on a wounded deer. "Hand over the saddlebags, cowboy," their leader growled, rain dripping from his hat brim. Ethan's hand went slowly to his Colt revolver. "Not today, friend." Gunshots shattered the night. Ethan fired twice, dropping one man from his horse with a cry. But the others were faster and meaner. A bullet tore through his left shoulder, burning like fire. Another grazed his ribs, ripping cloth and skin in a hot line. His horse reared in panic, throwing him hard to the ground. The animal bolted into the darkness, hooves pounding away. Ethan crawled through the mud. Blood poured from his wounds, mixing with rainwater until everything was red and black. He slid down a rocky embankment, tumbling over sharp stones until he landed at the edge of a narrow ravine. His body went still. The cold seeped into his bones like slow poison. In the lightning flashes, he saw his mother's face, her gentle smile from childhood back in Missouri. "I'm sorry, Ma," he whispered. Darkness closed around him like a heavy blanket. Ayanna was 23, daughter of a respected Apache elder. Her people, a small band of the western Apache, lived in hidden canyons not far from there. They had already lost hunting grounds to miners, ranchers, and the iron roads that cut through the land like scars. White men were the bringers of fences, broken promises, and soldiers who took sons away. Yet that stormy night, Ayanna had slipped away from the village to gather storm-washed herbs, yarrow, sage, and prickly pear, that grew stronger and more powerful after heavy rain. She heard the distant gunshots over the thunder. Curiosity mixed with caution pulled her toward the sound. When she found Ethan, he was barely breathing, pale as moonlit bone, his blood turning the mud black beneath him. Many in her village would have walked away. Her uncle had died at the hands of settlers years before. Her younger brother had been taken by soldiers and never returned. But Ayanna saw a man, not an enemy. She knelt in the cold mud without hesitation. "You live or you die here," she said in soft, careful English she had learned from traders and captured words over the years. "Choose life." She ripped long strips from her woolen blanket wrap and bound his wounds tightly to slow the bleeding. With strength born of hard years and necessity, she lifted his heavy frame onto her shoulders and half-dragged, half-carried him up the slippery slope to a small cave her people used for shelter during hunts. The cave mouth was narrow and hidden by thick brush and hanging vines. Inside, it was dry and warm compared to the storm outside. Ayanna built a low fire with dry wood she always kept stacked in the back corner. She boiled water in a small tin cup over the flames. She cleaned the bullet holes carefully with boiled rags, packed them with chewed yarrow leaves to fight infection and stop the flow of blood, then wrapped them in clean strips torn from her spare clothing. She forced sips of herbal tea, willow bark to ease the pain, prickly pear juice for strength, into his mouth, drop by drop. For 7 long days and nights she stayed with him. She hunted small game with her bow, rabbits and quail, and made nourishing broth from the meat and wild onions she dug up nearby. She sang quiet healing songs her grandmother had taught her, songs that spoke to the spirits of earth and sky. When fever came hot and fierce, she sponged his forehead with cool water carried from a nearby spring in a gourd. When he woke in pain, crying out, she held his rough hand in hers and spoke softly of the stars that watched over all living things, of rivers that never stopped flowing, of life that kept returning even after the hardest winters. Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness. In his fever dreams, he saw her face glowing in the firelight, strong cheekbones, long black hair braided with thin red yarn, eyes deep and knowing like still water at midnight. Once he woke enough to croak through cracked lips, "Why, help me." Ayanna answered simply, without anger or pity, "Because you are alive, and life is sacred, even yours." On the 8th day he managed to sit up against the cave wall. Color slowly returned to his face. He ate solid food for the first time, flat corn cakes she made from meal she carried in a small leather pouch. They talked in low voices. She told him her name was Ayanna, which meant eternal bloom in her language. He told her his, Ethan Cole. She asked about his world, the towns, the cattle drives, the reasons men left their homes to take land that was not empty. He asked about hers, the stories of her people, the sacred mountains, the way the land spoke if you listened quietly enough. For the first time in his life, he heard the Apache side without interruption or judgment. The treaties signed and then broken, the children who went hungry, the hunting grounds shrinking year by year like a drying river. When he could finally stand and walk a few steps without falling, he stood at the cave mouth looking out at the sun rising gold over the hills. "I owe you my life," he said, voice thick with emotion. Ayanna shook her head gently. "No debt, only remember. Go now, before soldiers or your people find you here and bring trouble to both of us." Ethan left at dawn. He found his horse grazing miles away, saddle still on, looking thin but alive. He rode home slowly, wounds healing under his torn shirt, but the memory of Ayanna stayed sharp as a fresh blade in his mind. Years rolled by like tumbleweeds across the open plain. Ethan threw himself into work with a fire he had never felt before. He bought failing ranches cheap when owners gave up, bred strong longhorn cattle that could survive the heat, dug deep wells, strung miles of barbed wire. By 1883, the Circle C Ranch sprawled across thousands of acres of good grassland. He hired honest hands, paid fair wages even in hard times, earned real respect in the nearest town. Folks started calling him King Cole behind his back, half in jest, half in awe of how far he had come from nothing. He married in 1881, a gentle schoolteacher named Clara who had come west to teach children in a one-room schoolhouse. She brought softness to his rough life, laughter to his quiet evenings. But 2 years later, she caught a bad fever during a wet winter. She died in their bed, holding his hand. Ethan buried her under a tall cottonwood tree near the house and never spoke of remarrying. He lived alone in the big adobe house he had built, the wide porch facing west with the sunsets burned red and gold across the valley. Every spring, when he rode the long boundary line near the ravine where he almost died, he stopped his horse. He looked down at the spot in the mud where blood had soaked the earth. He thought of Ayana's steady hands, her quiet voice in the dark cave. He kept a small pouch of dried sage she had given him as a parting gift tucked inside his vest pocket. He never told a single soul about that night. By 1886, the railroad pushed closer every month. Washington wanted clear land for tracks, towns, and new settlers hungry for opportunity. A new Indian agent arrived in the territory, cold-eyed, ambitious, eager to prove himself. Orders came down from on high. Remove scattered bands from what the government now called public domain. Ayana's people, now fewer than 80 souls after years of sickness and loss, received the official paper nailed to a tree. Leave your homes within 30 days or be removed by force. Ayana had become the village's medicine woman and one of its strongest voices. Her husband had died in a cavalry skirmish in 1882. She raised their son, Taza, now 12, and already tall like his father, alone with quiet strength. She stood before the elders under the council ramada. "We will not go quietly. This is our earth. Our ancestors' bones rest here. We stay." Word spread fast through the territory. In town, people shrugged over whiskey. About time those savages moved on. Ethan heard it in the saloon one dusty afternoon. His glass froze halfway to his lips. The ravine, the cave, the woman who could have let him bleed out and die. His stomach twisted. He rode home that night under a blood-red sunset, mind racing like a stampede. He could not let it happen. The next morning, Ethan put on his best coat, the one Clara had mended for him, saddled his strongest horse, and rode straight to the territorial capital. He met lawyers in dusty offices, clerks who looked bored, even the governor's aide over coffee. He carried rolled maps, cattle tallies showing his profits, banknotes that spoke louder than words. "These Apache live quietly on their side of the ridge," he told every man who would listen. "They hunt deer, grow small patches of corn, never raid ranches. My land touches their canyon. Let them stay on that narrow strip. I'll guarantee peace. I'll sign any paper, pay any fee." The town exploded with anger. Meetings were called in the schoolhouse. Men shouted in the streets, "Traitor! Indian lover!" A brick came through the window of Ethan's house one moonless night, shattering glass across the floor. His longtime foreman quit without a word. 2 more hands packed their gear and left at dawn. Ethan stood firm. "I don't ask you to like it," he told the men who stayed. "I ask you to remember we're all trying to live on the same hard ground." The fight had only just begun. Would Ethan be able to save Ayana and her people after all these years? To watch the second part and find out what happens next, like this video and follow the page. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is right now? Send some stars, follow, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next tale.